Alright, let's quickly recap. In the first part we discussed how Haki is also known as Supreme Chi, being the vibrating energy that is the basis of all existence. In the second part we learned that Chi, also known as spirit or prana, will vibrate at a certain constant speed which will then determine its frequency. That frequency within a being will then determine a chakra level they are resonating with. In One Piece's case, it will determine what kind of Haki is being used and at what level. You know what, let's look back at a clip from part 2.
Energy is everywhere, and in everything, there is energy. We have centers in our body that are conductors for this energy. These energy centers are called chakras. Through these chakras, we take in and send out energetic vibrations on many different levels, such as body, mind, heart, and soul. Each chakra has a different color associating with it, and each color has a different vibration. Now what we're going to do is figure out which type of Haki is associated with which frequency.
We learned that Armament Haki is the first 3 chakras, so what could the next 4 be? That's what we're going to find out in this installment. Now remember, the chakra types for Observation and Conquerors may be at a higher level of frequency, but that doesn't make them superior to Armament. Oh, and another interesting thing that I can't believe I forgot to mention in the last video, but it's so important. The true names of each Haki is Bosu Shoku, Kenbu Shoku, and Hao Shoku no Haki. Enjoy this lesson on Japanese etymology presented by an underqualified weeb. Okay, so Bosu is Armament, Kenbun is Observation, and Hao is Conquerors. Translations may vary, but you get the gist. Why I brought this to your attention is the word Shoku. In this context, Shoku means color. In fact, the Viz translation uses the word color officially. This greatly supports my theory. If Haki can be related to chakra, then the different Haki types certainly would have specific colors attributed to them. Now's a great time to go over what is the spirit of a person in the context of Chi and chakra. We know spirits and souls exist in the world of One Piece because we've seen that from the perspective of people using observation. Also, Brook was a literal soul without a body at one point. I don't want to get too deep into the concept of spiritual bodies because it can be very complicated and we are already dealing with a lot going over the chakras. There are different types of spiritual bodies that correspond with the 7 chakras. For now, I'll summarize and treat them like they are one spiritual body. And you know what? They really are one. It's almost like they're different interpretations of the same thing. All different planes of existence that a being can exist on simultaneously. For now, we'll treat the body like it can be split into just 2, physical and spiritual. That's all I have for this intro.
Everything in the universe is energy. Your body's energy. The room you're living in is energy. Everything you want is energy.
Everything is energy. And let me help you understand that just a little bit. There's the universe, of course, and our galaxy, and our planet, and then individuals, and then inside of this body are organ systems, and then there's cells, and then there's molecules, and then there's atoms, and then there is energy. So there are a lot of levels to talk about something on, but when you get down to it, everything is energy.
Heart chakra. It's pretty obvious where in the body this will be located. It's associated with the element of air and is large part about love and emotion. Makes sense why someone like Sanji would be so good at this type of Haki. Heart chakra is one that I could see actually being attributed to all 3 types of Haki. In fact, heart chakra can actually be split up into 3. However, for the sake of not overloading this already jam-packed theory/analysis with more info, I will spare the possible confusion and focus on the main heart chakra. Okay, let's start this chapter over from the top. With that out of the way, the heart chakra is attributed to observation Haki. It's a common trope when danger is afoot, someone can feel it in the air. Air is all around us. Spirit energy is all around us. Observation Haki is about becoming one with air, aka spirit, in order to see it for what it truly is. With basic observation Haki, you can see the Haki, or should I say hear the voice of another living being. However, on one occasion we were able to witness Zoro detect the breath, aka chi, of everything around him, living or not. Unlike the previous three in which the elements of earth, water, and fire were much more explicitly seen in Haki, it takes a bit more understanding of chi to get why air is present in observation Haki. Remember that chi, spirit, and prana all mean breath. And well, what is it that you breathe? An easy answer is air. And don't get confused by the name heart chakra. It is centered in the heart, but it actually covers the whole chest area and even hands. I'm sure there is some connection between the heart and Sanji's significance to his hands, but I won't get into that. The significance of air in relation to observation Haki is that air is the essence of the spirit all around us. With observation Haki, you can sense the spirit, or in other words, sense the air in other things. The more alive something is, the more air they breathe. The heart chakra is the meeting point between the physical and spiritual, the inner and outer world. The air from outside enters us, then is utilized and transformed within us. The blood our heart pumps requires oxygen, aka air, so you can imagine why it's called heart chakra and not lung chakra. While you breathe air into your lungs, heart chakra is about more than just the air we breathe that helps us live, but what we do with the air that keeps us alive. Ultimately, the air is used to fuel our hearts. Breathing fuels our soul. In many ways, the heart itself can be seen as our soul. More on that later. Notice how Zoro described the tree as having a heartbeat. Plant life may be inanimate for the most part, but it's still alive in the normal sense. The reason we probably don't see basic observation Haki detect the breath of all things is due to it being far easier to relate to animals than it is a rock or even a tree. If I were to describe the first level observation Haki in one word, it would be empathy. The reason for this is that when one vibrates with the heart chakra, they are getting in touch with their own inner spirit and opening their heart to the emotions of others around them.
This has the upside of being able to tell who has ill will towards you and who is genuinely on your side.
The downside to this is that it can leave you with a false sense of security if someone is really good at concealing their presence and/or emotion. And an even worse side effect is that if the person's heart is too open, or in other words, if they are too empathetic, it can cause them to take on the pain of others' hearts. The heart chakra is the middle of all 7 chakras, centered between the physical and spiritual. It heightens your physical sense, making you more aware of your surroundings as well as better instincts and reflexes. Anybody that wants to become a master sniper needs observation Haki because it can increase the potency of one's eyesight. Observation Haki is a power that comes in handy even outside of battle. It can be used to enhance the sense of smell, which can really come in handy if you're looking for food, and can even be used to determine the ingredients used in a dish. Its physical benefits only apply to observation Haki at its most basic level. The rest is all in the spirit. Think about the first time we seen observation Haki. It was in the form of mantra used by the sky people. This is very symbolic and appropriate. The physical realm is considered earthly and the spiritual is heavenly. So of course those that look like angels will be better at using a power that leans more towards the spiritual. The reason being more spiritually sensitive can aid a person in battle is because the warrior isn't just detecting their physical movement, but also the presence behind the attack. This is why Enel couldn't use mantra to predict Luffy's movement when Rubber Boy stopped putting any intent behind his attacks. Nami erroneously speculates that Enel was reading minds, but Enel himself describes it more as feeling what is to come. Once again, allow me to emphasize that the heart chakra is the bridge between the physical and the spiritual, so it makes sense with it a physical person can interpret things that exist on a spiritual plane of existence. Mind you, there's a difference between the physical heart and the spiritual heart that is named after said organ. The spiritual heart is actually symbolic and formless, but ironically can actually be considered what gives your spirit a form in the first place. Think about this, if everyone is chi, even the earth you stand on and the air you breathe, then wouldn't that overwhelm anyone that uses observation Haki to sense chi? If chi is literally all around you in all directions, in and outside of you, then that will cause a sensory overload for most people. It is true in that context we are basically in an ocean of chi, and should we recognize reality for what it is, then we would drown. That is why the first level of observation Haki focuses on one of the most important, if not the most important ingredient of the soul when it comes to humans. The heart is basically like the DNA of the spirit, a soul stitched together by emotions. It's hard to be empathetic and detect the emotions of a tree or a rock, so again showing why the average observation Haki user wouldn't be using the breath of all things. The heart being used to turn a spirit into a soul is the very reason the heart is virtually synonymous with the soul. Law has an ability to remove a person's heart. Actually, he has two different techniques that allow him to remove two different types of hearts. With one, he can remove a literal beating heart from the body, but another allows him to remove the spiritual heart. By putting Sanji's spiritual heart in Nami's body, you essentially had his soul inhabit her body. Everyone knows that the heart is symbolic of one's emotion. With this in mind, you can see why those that use observation Haki are able to gauge the emotion of others through the context of their spirit, also known as Haki. Being an empathetic warrior is a great way to predict what a person's next move is, but there's an even better way with the next level of observation Haki, known as future sight.
Your emotions, which really are the most powerful and important of your 6 physical vibrational interpreters, give you constant feedback about the harmonics of your current thoughts or vibrations, as they compare with the harmonics of your core vibrational state. The non-physical world is vibration, and your physical world that you know is vibration. There's nothing that exists outside of this vibrational nature, and there's nothing that is not managed by the law of attraction. Your understanding of vibration will help you to consciously bridge both worlds.
Now we move up the chakra ladder and get to throat, but we're actually going to put that aside and take a look at the third eye. If only it was as simple as just a straight line, but I believe throat chakra actually belongs to conquerors, so I will tackle that one after. Now believe it or not, I didn't just simply go and look at the 7 chakras and figure out how convenient it would be for the lower chakras to be armament, the middle to be observation, and the top to be conquerors. I made my decision by analyzing each characteristics and making an educated guess. Okay, so let's start over with a second take. The third eye chakra is that of the mind. Its element is light. Given that this chakra has to do with intuition, one might wonder, why doesn't observation Haki begin and end with the third eye? While it is true in the physical sense, we would look at our brains being our true selves simply in a vessel that we know as our body. This sentiment is not entirely true in the spiritual sense. When spirituality is involved, it is actually our hearts that make us who we are on the inside. This is even true in the world of One Piece. First example I would want to point to is the way mantra is said to work. It is described as hearing the voice of living beings. But this doesn't mean it's their minds that they are listening to, it's their emotion, the force that comes from their heart. Once again, recall when Law had the Straw Hats switch bodies. It wasn't their brains that were transferred, but rather their hearts. The purpose of our minds is to store information like data for our hearts to call upon as memories. Oh, what a coincidence! The character with the third eye has memory powers. Or maybe that's not a coincidence. More on that later. If we were to just be brains, inhabiting a body, operating purely off data, then we'd be no different than robots. It's truly our emotions that make us alive, rather than us just being self-operating objects. One of the 7 layers of spiritual bodies is the emotional body. The strength of emotion will empower the body, thus empowers the spirit overall. This is why you see in a lot of fiction, especially battle shonen, strength coincides with emotions. The emotions of a character can allow them a power that surpasses what they are physically capable of. Side note, if you happen to be a fan of Naruto and also would like a better explanation of the difference between the heart, soul, and mind, check out my second episode of Deep Dive Case Madara. I'll go over the spirit and how that then connects to the heart. The soul represents a part of the universe. It is the life force that animates the inanimate. It is continually recycled, birth, death, and rebirth. I go into great detail all of these spiritual concepts. But let's get back on topic. Have you ever heard of photographic memory? It takes a really powerful mind to have one. That's because it's using the light element of the third eye to put together an image made from the data stored in the brain. That data, or in other words, memories, wouldn't be there had the heart not experienced those events in the past. Now, what if the heart could experience something before it happened? The first level only reacts to things as they are happening in the present. The second level uses the light of the mind to put together a mental image of what is going to happen. That seems like it's seeing the future, but what it's actually doing is giving you a memory of something that hasn't even happened yet. Future sight is great and all, but the downside is that it requires a great deal of concentration. It's best not to be distracted when using basic observation Haki. However, heart chakra is quite close to the solar plexus, thus it's much easier to count on your gut instincts. However, the higher you go up the chakra channels, the less you require or rely on physical attributes. As I mentioned earlier, emotions are a source of spiritual power, so it only makes sense that the more power relies on the spirit, the more affected it will be by emotional disturbances. When Katakuri was embarrassed by his siesta being witnessed by others, it messed with his ability to use future sight. On the flip side, it is no coincidence that folks like Lucci or Virgo are so good at using root chakra based Haki. They aren't very emotional beings, thus it would make sense that they'd focus their efforts on mastering a Haki type that is the most physical, or in other words, least spiritual / emotional. Just some advice for those that want to get into spirituality. If you're trying to address and treat your frequency levels, then you are more inclined to do yoga, tai chi, or many other physical activities for the lower levels. On the contrary, you should be more inclined to meditate for the higher levels. Just a little tidbit I wanted to add.
Another downside and great proof of why basic observation is just as good and still needed
Is that even if you can see ahead, you would still need to be able to physically react to what the future holds. Seeing the future can prepare you for what would happen, but should you choose to change the outcome, then you are going to have to be able to react to the future that you yourself changed. And even if the enemy can't see the future, they can still predict what you do in the present. Lastly, remember what I said about the multiple layers of spiritual body and how it is like different planes of existence. Well, now I'm going to dive deeper into that topic. Given that the different levels to which spiritual existence can be interpreted, it stands to reason that there are levels to which a person can perceive spiritual presence. What I mean by this is that not all observation Haki is equal when it comes to what can be perceived. Being able to see into the future is one way that observation Haki can go beyond basic. However, characters like Aiza and Kobe have observation so powerful it's almost like they can read minds. Really, what they are doing is interpreting the voice of emotions. There is an emotional plane of existence when it comes to the spirit. Also, look at Zoro and the breath of all things. That's advanced observation because not only could he detect the presence of living things, but non-living things as well. Then you have the voice of all things that only some are able to inherently hear. I believe this all has to do with being able to use the third eye to see all spiritual levels of existence. And what do you know? Big Mom said that a person of the third eye tribe would be able to read the poneglyph. In my opinion, that means they have to unlock, activate, and master the third eye chakra. It only makes sense that someone of the third eye tribe would be able to master the full potential of the third eye chakra, which would then give them the ability to see what is meant to be heard by the voice of all things. Also, is it any surprise that the person with a third eye also has a power centered around memory, data, and photography? The root word for photo is light, just like the element of the third eye. I take it all as evidence of Oda's genius writing. That covers observation Haki. So now we move on to the final one, Haki of the Kings.
When we have a feeling in our hearts, we're creating electrical and magnetic waves inside of our bodies that extend beyond our bodies into the world around us. And what's so interesting is the research shows that those waves extend not just 1 meter or 2 meters, many kilometers beyond where our heart physically resides.
I already told you that throat chakra is one of the two, and by process of elimination, the crown chakra is also associated with Conqueror's Haki. But come on, that was a given. Of course, a crown would go to the power meant to rule over others. In Skypiea, Haki is known as mantra. They seem to exclusively use observation Haki, which is ironic because the name is most suited for Conqueror's Haki. Mantras are tools used in spirituality to affect vibrations internally or externally. When it's external, it is verbal, and when it's internal, it is a thought. There are many names for this: mantra, meditation, prayer, but you just basically have to think of it as an inner and outer voice. Yes, we speak with our throats, so it's quite obvious where we'll be starting off at. There are two elements to describe throat chakra best: ether and sound, and some may say lightning, but we'll talk about that much later. Ether can mean sky, the place where heaven is located, but ether's true origin lies with it being the air that the Greek gods breathe. Remember, Haki by itself means supreme chi, and chi means breath. Do you see where I'm going with this? Where heart chakra is just regular air we breathe, throat chakra is godly breath, or rather, supreme breath. And don't you remember in part 1 and 2, the other name I gave supreme breath? It was voice. And where did your voice come from? The throat, of course. Ether is just another way of saying Haki, or voice. Conqueror's Haki is the embodiment of spirit. Remember when I said heart was like DNA? Well, the soul is the spiritual body that is formed by that DNA. Basically, since the element of throat chakra is ether, it's like saying that the element is Haki itself. Conqueror's Haki is soul, or in other words, Haki in its rawest form. Now, given that Haki by itself is supreme, there is already an implied sense of sovereignty to it. But then you have Shoku no Haki, which in a way can be seen as supreme king, supreme chief, like king of kings. And then Danchin Jiao implies that one of the Shoku users will rule over the rest of the kings. So like a king of kings, of kings. Now, that's impossible. Oh wait. Anyway, Haki is described as a voice within a being, and that voice is meant to be let out. Remember when I said, in order to talk, you must use your voice. In order to use your voice, you must breathe. Preferably you're exhaling while you're speaking. Have you ever tried talking while inhaling? It's practically impossible. Doing that makes you sound really quiet and super weak. Weak. That voice inside of you is most powerful when let out. Your ether, aka supreme breath, aka Haki, aka voice, needs to be loud and clear. Don't forget, the other element of throat chakra is sound. Shoku no Haki is the user being able to have that voice heard externally. It is the power of a king. Yelling may seem like a trivial power. Simply just screaming as loud as you want might make it seem like it's a power more befitting a toddler, but it's actually best used by the king of the jungle.
Did you hear that? The future king! Oh, don't hurt me. Oh, do it again.
You know, we've never seen a true Lion Zone user. I bet you it'll be someone or something that specializes in Conqueror's Haki. I say that because King's Haki is like that of a spiritual roar. In fact, isn't there a character known as Roar of the Seas? Oh yeah, I made a video about why I think Apoo's Devil Fruit could be Conqueror's Haki. Conqueror's Haki, on the other hand, is just a force. It is intangible. Do you know of a vibrational energy that is non-physical but can do physical damage? One that comes to mind is called sound. You know, like what Apoo's Devil Fruit powers are? Now that we know that throat chakra's element is sound, just like Apoo's ability, it just makes that theory all the more credible. Check out that vid if you haven't already. When Conqueror's Haki is used, it seems to be an invisible force that affects people. That may sound supernatural. I could easily call it an astral or ethereal attack, and it is. But there is an invisible force that can be used as a weapon to deliberately harm people that exist in real life. Yes, the real world that you and I live in. It's called sound. There are ways to affect a person's frequency through the 5 senses. The most effective way is through their ears. Sound is effective for many reasons. For one, your ears are always open. It's not easy to defend against. The frequencies of the person making the sound is free for them to adjust. Most dangerous of all is how it can easily affect your subconscious without you realizing. It can alter a person's emotional well-being, aka their frequency. Remember how I said someone using observation could be open to a point that other spirits and emotions can harm them? Well, imagine that, but instead of someone receiving the frequency, it is being projected out. A wave of a person's haki that can be detected no matter how much a victim lacks spiritual awareness. It's not a sound that can be heard in the physical realm, but rather the ethereal realm. Sound isn't just powerful because of how it can affect the spirit, heart, and mind. It can have physical ramifications as well. The most famous example is being able to break a wine glass with sound. In the video game Pirate Warriors 4, all of the Conquerors use Conqueror's Haki, except Kaido. Did they forget? Did they feel they couldn't have Kaido use Conqueror's Haki without concrete, official confirmation of him having that ability? Perhaps, but I'd argue that he does actually have Conqueror's Haki in the game. See, he has this one move where all he does is yell, and while he yells it also shows the black lightning of Conqueror's Haki. Given my theory that Conqueror's Haki is from the throat chakra, this makes perfect sense. Not only that, but don't forget another word for Haki is voice. So of course, strong Haki would make for a loud voice, aka yelling.
Don't you dare!
However, it ain't as simple as just chalking it up to just yelling. You should be thinking to yourself, if Conqueror's Haki is about making noise, then how come we've seen multiple occasions of characters using Conqueror's Haki without even opening their mouths? Remember what I had just said about how sound can affect the subconscious, combined with it not actually being a sound on the physical realm.
If you judged only by your sensory factors, you'd believe that train tracks met in the distance. But you know better than that, and you turn away from your senses. If you lived only by your sensory factors, you'd believe that a dog whistle made no sound. But you know better than that, so you turn away from your sensory factors and you stand out in your yard and you blow away. And yet how many times, if we're not careful, do we find ourselves living at nothing more than the sensory level?
Yes, while there may have been many instances of the Conqueror's users physically yelling, it wasn't actually the yelling on the physical realm that is doing the most damage. First, remember that we're dealing with a spiritual chakra. Throat is the lowest of the 3 spiritual chakras and as a result is the most physical. So it makes sense why physical action can activate the spiritual voice. Now remember that I said that there's more than one body to a single being. Just like I talked earlier about with hearts, there are multiple versions of body parts. There is a physical and spiritual throat and both can be used at the same time, such as when Big Mom was crying over the breaking of Mother Carmel's picture. Vast majority of the time the physical throat is solely being used. But there are instances such as the first time that Conqueror's Haki was used, in which the spiritual throat can be used without the physical counterpart. Conqueror's Haki is a layered scream that can exist on multiple realms. Think of the spiritual scream as like a dog whistle in the physical realm. The sound is there, but it can't be heard, physically, only spiritually. Let's look at Luffy using Conquerors on the 50,000 fishermen. Luffy was quiet in the physical realm, but try and imagine his spiritual body in that moment. his ethereal form, you can call it, or his soul, or even a phantom. Ghost Luffy in that moment is basically letting out a loud roar that can be heard by the souls of all the fishman enemies around him. His ghostly wail is intimidating enough that it breaks the spirits of those with a weak will. Just to reiterate, even though the sound isn't heard with physical ears, it is a sound that exists and can even affect non-living physical objects, such as Whitebeard's ship or the clouds in the sky. This makes sense for two reasons. First, remember what we learned from the breath of all things. Everything has a breath, aka everything has a spirit. So it shouldn't be a surprise that a purely spiritual attack can damage physical objects, since everything is spiritual. The second reason is that sound, even in the physical realm, can do physical damage despite being intangible. In a way, the mom is right. That boy didn't break the cup with his voice. It isn't actually the sound that breaks the wine glass. It's the way the sound is causing the glass to vibrate. Remember, we're more focused on the effect rather than the cause. It always comes back to vibrations. Sound waves are created by vibrations traveling across any object, including air. However, there's an even more powerful thing that can be done with sound. It's this neat thing called music.
When we speak of vibration, we're actually calling your attention to the basis of your experience, for everything is actually vibrationally based. We could use the word energy interchangeably, and there are many other words in your vocabulary that accurately apply. Most understand the vibrational characteristics of sound. Sometimes when the deep, rich bass notes of your musical instruments are played loudly, you can even feel the vibrational nature of sound.
Music and spirituality are joined at the hip. Think about this. The word spirit means breath. Well, what is the process of breathing? You breathe in and out. In, out. In, out. In, out. In, out. In, out. It is a ripple. Breaths have a different wavelength, frequency, and rhythm. Breathing itself is a song. One that begins and ends with one's life. Have you ever heard of soul music? It's a specific genre, but really all music is soul music. The reason this genre is referred to as soul is because it puts a heavy emphasis on the singers, aka the human voice that creates the noise for the song. It's our voice that has the most soul in the music we create. When you really think about what singers do, it should help you understand why it is that Conquerors is the rawest form of Haki and why Haki itself is the element of the throat. Consider what this theory from the beginning has been about. We've been learning how the adjustment of one's frequencies will result in various performances. Well, guess what? Singers do that very thing. Just like how there is a spectrum for colors, chi, and chakra, the same applies to the human voice. We have a low pitch and a high pitch. Singers use keys that range from A to G.
Just pick up the telephone and call.
You can actually go on YouTube right now and find tunes for each chakra. Mantras aren't just things you can say, but can be incorporated in songs as well. These are known as seeds. So as you can see, these real-life examples support that there is a link between music and spiritual abilities. So now let's look at themes in the story that Oda is trying to convey. There is no better arc to look at than the ones where the Soul King and Queen got to show off their powers. In the Whole Cake Island arc, there was an occurring theme: food, which makes sense. Have you ever heard of soul food? Oops, I got a little ahead of myself. What I meant to reference was the music. the constant singing by Big Mom and her homies. It makes sense given that her powers are all about the soul. Speaking of music and souls, if we're gonna talk about Big Mom's powers, we might as well speak about Brooke as well. Now before I do that, I must clarify more about what I believe Conqueror's Haki to be. Okay, so it's a spiritual attack. Not a very good explanation because you could say the same about Armament. However, it is the similarities between Armament and Conquerors that'll help us understand the difference, and is a great reference point when it comes to understanding Conquerors. While Conquerors and Armament may seem to be of the same essence, they actually operate on different realms. Okay, allow me to explain. Armament is indeed a spiritual attack and defense, but it is physically manifested. It is taking spiritual energy and converting it into something that could exist on the physical realm. Where Conquerors differ is that it is a spiritual ability that remains on the spiritual realm, aka ethereal or astral. Conqueror's Haki is intangible, just like air, ether, spirit, prana, chi, voice, or sound. I don't believe that people that have access to use Conqueror's Haki have some sort of exclusive type of spirit. Rayleigh said it best. It is that the Conquerors are able to manipulate this form of Haki, or in other words, a level of frequency. Specializing in the throat chakra is a great way of saying you are very outspoken. You know, like Luffy. However, even if you aren't the best public speaker, it doesn't mean you can't speak. Everyone has their own voice. This is why I believe that while it may help, you don't have to have Conqueror's Haki of your own in order to defend against others who may use it to harm you. Now, the manipulation of one's soul, doesn't that sound familiar? Oh yeah, that's exactly what Big Mom and Brooke's devil fruit powers do. In fact, they are the perfect examples to explain the difference between an Armament attack and a Conqueror's attack. Remember how Luffy used Armament to attack Prometheus? It had no effect. Why so? Shouldn't Armament always work even to those that are like Ace, who is also like a living flame? The reason is because that like Armament Haki, a Logia's body may be supernatural or spiritual, but the person still exists on the physical realm. However, Prometheus exists on the ethereal realm. You might say that doesn't make sense. Fire does indeed exist within the physical realm. That much is true, but Prometheus isn't made of fire. He's actually a spirit inhabiting a flame. A soul fragment to be more specific. Not only that, but Haki isn't meant to touch elements, it's meant to touch the physical being that assumes elemental form. Think about it. Someone like Crocodile or Aokiji already are solid objects. Sand and ice are both physical solid objects. Touching them is never the problem, it's the fact that you can't hurt them. If Luffy were to use Haki to punch a regular flame, his hand would go right through. When Ace gets punched by Haki and gets hurt, that is because he is a person that originates in the physical realm as a tangible body. On the contrary, even if Luffy's punch were to ignore fire's intangible state like it does for Ace, punching Prometheus still wouldn't work because it's no different than punching a ghost. Speaking of ghosts, Brooke may seem like a skeleton, but he is in fact a spirit inhabiting those bones. To further show evidence that his spiritual powers are linked to throat chakra, let's talk about how he even discovered he could become a phantom. Recall when I said throat chakra is the external vibration, aka verbal. Well, in order for Brooke to become a ghost that first time, he said, "I'm going ghost!" Okay, no. Actually, what he said was a prayer. Case in point, just like with Conqueror's Haki, he activated his spirit with his throat chakra. And just like the spirit of a homie, Brooke's true body originates in the ethereal realm, hence why he would be able to harm Prometheus. If you want an even more in-depth explanation, check out my secret ending in which I use a graph to help me explain. Moving on, I believe that Brooke and Big Mom's power are essentially Conqueror's Haki being used with extra effects. In fact, given that Haki is all about the spirit, it should be no surprise that the Soul Devil Fruit could possibly have that side effect. Just look at her life or death move. It's practically a more advanced and elaborate version of standard Conquerors. It's an intimidation move that can be used to spiritually damage a person. So much so that it can even cause death. And also, just like Conquerors, it can have no effect on a person if they have a strong enough will to not be intimidated. One might chalk it up to Lin Lin herself being the one that has Conqueror's Haki, and she could be just combining it with her devil fruit. However, I can see many of you calling outright BS on Brooke having Conqueror's Haki. I know it may seem outlandish, but I have plenty of evidence. First, remember throat chakra's element is sound, by extension, soul, and Haki. Everyone has a voice inside of them. All it would take is a way for someone to be granted the ability to manipulate and exert that voice, aka soul. Perhaps that could be done with the help of the devil fruit centered around that very power. And let's not forget his epithet, Soul King. Then consider that Conqueror's Haki is basically kingly spirit. I mean, come on, Haoshoku no Haki and Soru Kingu are practically synonymous. Now, I wouldn't be as ridiculous as to bring this up just off names alone. As I said, Conqueror's Haki is a spiritual attack. It is intangible, can be described as a sound or scream. Also, it can be used to break the will of weaker souls. If that doesn't accurately describe Brooke's ability, then I don't know what does.
Baby. Soul King だぜ。取ってつけたようなソウルが私の執念のテーマ性の叫びの前に立ってられるはずないんだぜ。Baby.
With all that being said, what is the big deal about Conqueror's Haki? I guess it's cool that it can cause frequencies powerful enough to hurt the soul and possibly even do some damage to physical environment. But, I mean, is that really all that cool compared to being able to create fire or see into the future? Even hardening and basic observation is just as useful, if not more useful, most of the time. There has to be more to Conquerors for it to be such a feared power. I believe the answer lies once again with the Soul King. You see, Brooke doesn't just scream to use the element of sound, he also sings and plays instruments to create music. Yep, even his music is Conqueror's Haki. I believe music to be a more refined spiritual power than just yelling. Brooke has been able to use his music not just to knock out his opponents, but actually put them to sleep. He can fine-tune the frequencies he exerts in his spiritual attack. It's his other musical attacks that I believe will show us what the true potential of Conqueror's Haki is. So we know he can use his powers to dull his enemies, which is similar to Conqueror's, but he can also use it to pump up his allies. The truth of Conqueror's Haki is that it can alter the frequency of others. It's been used thus far to crush wills, but maybe it could be used to raise the frequency of others as well. Perhaps we've been seeing that power being used this whole time and not realizing it. Think about this, is a king's only duty to belittle others and make them feel insignificant? If he's a good king, he's going to want to encourage those under him to be their best selves. Is it possible that Luffy has been using this power to inspire those around him? This may be the power Mihawk referred to. There is another musical ability that Brooke has that actually leads us into the last chakra. So let's finally get into explaining the highest chakra of them all, the crown.
The most potent form of energy, by the way, is thought. It penetrates all space and all time. Every thought has a frequency. We can measure a thought. What most people don't understand is a thought has a biochemical and bioelectrical property. Every thought, which means it has a frequency. And so if you're thinking that thought over and over and over again, or if you're imagining in your mind, okay, having that brand new car, having the money that you need, building that company, finding your soulmate, if you imagine what that looks like, you're emitting that frequency on a consistent basis.
Remember when I said third eye deals with the mind? It might lead you to believe that chakra is centered in the brain, but it is between the eyebrows. It is the crown chakra that is located in the brain, in the physical sense, but in the spiritual sense, it's sort of on top of your head, you know, like an actual crown or a halo. However, calling it the mind would be underselling it. It's more like your reality. It is everything that you've been building up to through all the chakras. The associating element is thought, the most powerful of all elements. What is a voice without a thought? Remember Qi? It's not just an essence, but a 5,000-year Chinese philosophy. We haven't talked about it in detail for a while since introducing chakra into this theory. Well, actually, we've been talking about it this whole time. Quick reminder, chakra is made of prana, and Qi is the same as prana. Basically, the concepts are explained differently, but are actually the same. Different paths to the same truth. The way the levels of frequency are explained for Qi is considerably different. However, can be related to Haki. For example, in part 2 I talked about how Rokushiki and Gear 4 display abilities that could be represented by root chakra. In another video I explained Rokushiki again, but instead I use Qi's levels of frequency instead of chakra. I'm not going to make a separate video like that for all the different frequencies of Qi, but just know it can be done. In fact, maybe somebody watching this video wants to take on that challenge. Let me know and I'll help you in any way I can. With all that said, let's read the highest frequency of Qi and see if it relates to Haki. Spirituality as divine light. At this level, Qi energetically manifests through subtle vibrations which contain messages, i.e., thoughts and feelings resonating within specific objects' energetic field. Taoist priests teach that these energetic messages extend through infinite space to the Tao. As you see, whether it be Qi or prana, the highest frequency, aka the most divine element of all, is thought. What is the number one importance of an omnipotent and omniscient God? It is the power to create and know anything and everything. That is a power that would not exist without thought coming first. Not only that, but a God can grant other things the ability to think and have their own free will. A God can even lead, guide, and manipulate others with their messages, aka their voice. Apply thought to sound or any frequency and you can create. Creation, craftsmanship, artistry, innovations, and the passion for a new life or world is the product of crown chakra. Let's look at Big Mom. She is able to crush the will of others and even rob them of their souls. Just some typical soul manipulation, like I said Conqueror's Haki should be. However, if I'm correct about her powers being similar to that which you'd expect from Conqueror's Haki being taken to the next level and mastered, then that would be great news for me. Because if you aren't aware, I have a cursed sword theory in which I talk about how I believe cursed blades aren't actually cursed, but rather given a consciousness by Haki. Now, we already know black blades are the product of Armament Haki. It makes the blade tougher, exactly what you'd expect from hardening. However, cursed blades don't look different. I believe it is filled with an intangible spirit, you know, like Conqueror's Haki. Something about giving an inanimate object a consciousness sounds familiar. Isn't that exactly what Big Mom does to make her very talkative and often singing homies? Now let's apply this knowledge to put together a little theory. Okay, so piggybacking off of my cursed blade theory, in which I imply that there's Haki imbued in the blade that comes from the blacksmith, which gives the sword its own presence. I will now propose that it is Haki imbued within the poneglyphs left by their original creators that leaves a voice for Roger to hear using the technique known as the voice of all things. And what do you know, cursed blades and poneglyphs are both made in Wano. If putting Haki into a poneglyph gives it a voice, then that falls in line with what seems to be the primary objective of many homies. When Mother Camel creates a homie, she said that she would give it a voice. In fact, in one of the secret endings, I compared my theory to that of the Clabartaman, a spirit inhabiting a ship, which I believe to be the result of Conqueror's Haki. And what do you know? Big Mom's ship has its own spirit. Big Mom's power perfectly encapsulates the crown chakra element, which is one of the biggest reasons why I believe the power of thought is Conqueror's true power. In the first instance of seeing Luffy use Conqueror's Haki, he calmly stated to the bull his intent. He used his voice to get across his will. But really, it was what was on his mind that mattered most. The thing about Luffy is that 99% of the time, he speaks his thoughts aloud. He's constantly projecting the most powerful element, his thoughts. In my Cursed Blade theory, I said the swordsmith may have had Conqueror's Haki because they wanted to be the best swordsmith in the world. King of the swordsmith, I guess you could say. However, I think it's more than that. I believe it's about how passionately one devotes their self to whatever they put out into the world. It is said that a lot of people with Conqueror's Haki are people that make a name for themselves. That's what they put out into the world. Their presence, their life, their tale. It's what you put out into the world by creating. There are those that forge the poneglyphs or swords that could be a great example of using Conqueror's Haki in whatever they make. Culinary arts is also a great example. For starters, it already uses life force of whatever animal or vegetable is in the dish, but also the passion of the chef. The word shoku, as I pointed out earlier, can mean color, but a more common definition is actually meant to refer to a meal or diet. So I wouldn't be too shocked if you could relate food to Haki. In fact, it's kinda genius. First of all, Sanji is a main character, and food is super important to his character. It gave a whole new significance to his role as a chef if it was integral to the power of his crew. In addition, his father is a scientist obsessed with gaining power. He goes about it in cruel and immoral ways. It'd be such a twist of irony if Sanji were to outdo his father with the method as wholesome and looked down upon as cooking. Also, it's relatable to real-life spirituality as food plays a big role in your physical and spiritual wellness. You can even plan your diet to become more in tune with specific chakras. Now let's compare special meals to Conqueror's Haki. Attack cuisine, which by the way has a similar name to fighting music, watch that video if you haven't. Attack cuisine is a food described to have an aura emanating from it. It can give a boost to whoever eats it. Sanji can even whip up a dish so powerful that his food can knock people out. So many similarities to Conquerors. Another great art form to look at once again is music. Brook can play a song that has the ability to warp the reality of those around him. Keyword, reality. Brook himself is a skeleton that is animated by his spirit, aka his Haki. He truly exists as a voice assuming the appearance of an ethereal being. It isn't Brook who has Conqueror's Haki, it is his devil fruit that is using its own Haki on him. Brook as a musician can then create things that activate his crown chakra and amplify the already inherent Conqueror's Haki bestowed to him by his devil fruit. We already know not just anyone can use Conqueror's Haki. Brook may be an exception because of his devil fruit, but no matter how much of a name a person makes for themselves or how badly they want to cook, a person can't earn the right to use Conqueror's Haki. Or at least, they can't use it in a way Conqueror's has presently been shown to us. I'll describe the way we've seen Conquerors canonically displayed as a scream for my next analogy. Is screaming the only way to create in this world? No matter how loud one speaks, it doesn't have to have any bearing on how passionately one works on their craft. A person can silently cook, make a sword, or fix a ship, and still do it with all the passion of their soul. Usopp may not have Conqueror's Haki, but that doesn't mean he didn't put his spirit wholeheartedly into tending the going merry. His passion allowed him to activate his crown chakra and unknowingly use Conquerors on his dear ship. The last thing I wanted to address is lightning, this element that is without a doubt a product of Conqueror's Haki. When Doflamingo and Luffy clash with Conquerors, what do you see? Also, what's up with attacks like Thor Elephant Gun or Kaido's Thunder Bagua? Similar to like what I said in the last installment, which I believe through armament fire can be manifested, I also believe that lightning can be conjured through Haki as well. Wait a sec, fire and lightning spiritual powers. Ah, I see now. Is that where Oda could be going with that? And Napoleon is a metal sword, metal representing the element of earth. Okay, let's stick to the topic. Consider this, when Nami has used Zeus's lightning powers, she done so by giving him weather eggs. I highly doubt Big Mom does that to activate Zeus's lightning. Instead, Big Mom empowers Zeus with her own soul, aka Haki. And somehow that spiritual power can generate lightning. Let's look at another Yonko, red-haired Shanks. Okay, so if you notice, I primarily stick to using the manga as evidence for my theories. I even do my best to avoid the anime. However, even so, you can still look at other sources of media as reference points, despite having weaker credibility. I say this because the Pirate Warriors series often shows off lightning in the attacks used by Conqueror's Haki users. Kaido's moveset is almost all lightning, especially his roar that I mentioned earlier. With that context in mind, look at Shanks. He too uses a ton of lightning. And the thing is, when the game developers designed the moveset, I assume it had to be run by Oda for approval. Also, a lot of people have assumed that Dragon is some kind of Wind Devil Fruit user. However, if that were to be the case, how would that explain how he used lightning to save Luffy? As you can see, a lot of top tier fighters have shown lightning abilities, and it actually makes sense considering how divine the element is. Thunder and lightning is a godly power that comes from the heavens. I could see it being attributed to either Throat or Crown. Throat because it involves ether, the sky which lightning comes from. Also, given that the element of sound goes along with thunder as well, Throat Chakra has a good reason behind why Conqueror's Haki users create lightning. The reason it could be Crown is because that chakra is associated with our brains, and our brains operate off electricity. Also, lightning is considered a divine power, and Crown is the most divine of the 7 chakras. It's hard for me to pinpoint, so I saved it for after I talked about both chakras. If I had to choose one, I would go with Throat, because I said that it has the element of Haki itself, and we've actually seen the black lightning not just with Conquerors, but Armament too, even with characters not confirmed to have Conquerors. I believe the reason a clash caused by Armament can cause lightning is because the clash itself causes a loud noise. Keyword noise, like a thunderclap. And the reason I believe you can see that same black lightning from Conquerors is because the element of Throat is sound. With that done, we have finally worked our way up the chakra ladder. So, does that mean we're finished? Perfectly enlightened, we're nowhere to go? Nope, not in the slightest. You see, the purpose of the journey is not to create the perfect reality for yourself, but rather a new reality. When one makes it all the way up to the crown, they have a reality shift, a new outlook on life. It is then that you bring this vision to the outer world to share it with others. The way this is done is by going in the opposite direction. You initially went from root to crown, now it's time to go from crown to root. And that's where we will pick it up in the next and final episode, when we talk about and speculate the origin of devil fruits. That's it for Food for Thought. If you'd like to hear me elaborate more, then stick around for the secret ending. Would like Food for Thought? Then check out the rest of my channel. Want to see some actually well thought out analysis and theories with a bunch of evidence to back them up? Well, then check out my series Deep Dive. Thanks for watching. Secret ending time. There are 2 things I want to talk about. First, I'll go more in depth and why you shouldn't rank the levels of frequency in terms of Haki, as well as why they shouldn't be used for power scaling. Second, I want to give an even better explanation of the differences between Armament and Conqueror's attack. There should be a time code in case you'd like to skip to that. Alright, so as I said before, the different levels of chakra aren't superior to one another, or in this case, levels of Haki aren't superior to one another. Now don't mistake this with me saying that it takes an equal amount of skill. Clearly, Advanced Armament Haki is called Advanced for a reason. It's not as easy to learn as the basic version. I wouldn't say it is better than Hardening, however I would say that whoever learns Advanced Armament would be better off learning it. Why wouldn't you want to add more to your arsenal? The point of working up the streams of chakra is not to move on to a better version of a chakra, but rather move on to a better version of yourself. Let's say you are working on your sacral chakra and you see someone working on their heart chakra. That doesn't make that person better than you. First off, as I stated in the end, it isn't just about moving up. Maybe you're moving down. And being on sacral, you're actually just one chakra away from your goal of grounding yourself. Sometimes you aren't moving in any direction. You might just feel the need to address a deficient chakra. There's no point in making assumptions when you don't know the full story. Secondly, and more importantly, a journey of spirituality is meant for oneself, not to be compared to others. Being more spiritual doesn't make one person better than another. There's actually more to life than just spiritual wealth. Of course, you have financial wealth. A person can use their time and resources toward their physical or intellectual well-being. I believe one of the best examples of this in One Piece is Luffy versus Marigold and Sandersonia. They are Haki users. In fact, they were advanced users. Marigold showcased advanced armament, and Sandersonia was possibly using Future Sight, as she stated she knew where Luffy would attack. Luffy, on the other hand, knew no Haki at all. I've seen a lot of One Piece followers believe that if a person doesn't know Haki or knows a lesser Haki, they must be weaker, but that is ridiculous because Luffy was able to hold his own against the Snake Sisters and even overwhelm them. Haki is much more a tool than it is a level of strength. Someone in response to my Red Hawk theory asked me, how could Red Hawk be Advanced Armament Haki if it wasn't enough to take out Doflamingo? I thought this was a great point, one I hadn't considered. However, the reason I never considered it is because it's kind of baseless. We don't have much of a true reference point to propose that advanced Armament Haki would be enough to take out Doflamingo. First of all, Doflamingo had monstrous endurance. Advanced Armament Haki is described to do interior damage, which both Red Hawk and Gamma Knife did. Besides, it's not like he completely brushed off Red Hawk. He dropped to his knees and coughed up blood. The next point he brought up is that advanced Armament Haki should be stronger than basic Armament Haki, to which I agree, but with a caveat. It's not so much that advanced Armament Haki is some kind of power boost, like going from Super Saiyan to Super Saiyan 2. What makes advanced Armament stronger offensively is that it is a concentrated attack. It focuses the Haki from throughout the entire body to a single point and targets the inside of the opponent. With that being said, why would that be a counterpoint to my theory? I mean, Red Hawk is a single Haki punch, yet it is strong enough to do a notable amount of harm to Doflamingo. Would a normal Haki punch do that kind of damage? No way. Thus, like the guy said, it is stronger than basic Haki. However, his last point is where I saw where he was coming from. He said that Luffy tried to beat Kaido with Gear 4th but failed, but believes he would be successful with advanced armament. Thus, his rationale is that advanced armament must be stronger than Gear 4th. What I pointed out is that just because Luffy wanted to use it to break Kaido's defense, it doesn't mean it's astronomically stronger. The thing to consider is that it's different types of damage. The reason advanced Armament Haki would be useful against Kaido is because it would hurt him past his thick skin and do interior damage. The first time we see Luffy use advanced Armament Haki intentionally is against a tree. Do you really think Luffy is proud of destroying a tree? Luffy could have done that all the way back when he was in the East Blue. It's the method of attack that he desires over the increased damage. With that in mind, how does advanced Armament Haki stack up against Gear 4th? The way I look at it is that there's no reason to compare the two when they do different types of damage, and advanced Armament Haki will be incorporated into Gear 4th eventually anyway. The question is, if Red Hawk is advanced Armament Haki, why is it possible that Gear 4th took out Doflamingo when Red Hawk couldn't? Well, the thing is, Gear 4th isn't just some power up to Haki. It's not like he goes Super Saiyan. What's happening is he's increasing his muscles. It's when you take that into consideration that you realize why it is Gear 4th could potentially do more damage. Gear 4th is significantly stronger than his base form, muscles wise. It could be that the increase in muscle can make up for whatever the increase in damage the advanced Armament Haki of Red Hawk does. Not only that, Luffy only landed one punch with Red Hawk. Luffy had to hit Doflamingo many times with Gear 4th to take him down, so it's not like Gear 4th completely outclassed Red Hawk. And remember, Luffy was able to knock back Marigold despite her using Haki, meanwhile he wasn't. So yeah, physical strength still matters even though Haki is a thing. Just look at Kyros. He showed no Haki, and even with one lead he could still stand up against Diamante. Pun intended.
Another thing I've been asked many times is how is it that Sanji can use a 3rd level armament when he hasn't shown to be exceptionally skilled with the 1st or 2nd form? And it's true, someone like Zoro has shown to be much more skilled with the 1st and 2nd level armament. In fact, Oda has said that Zoro specializes in armament. With that in mind, wouldn't it make more sense for Zoro to be the one using fire? Not necessarily, and here's my reasons. First off, I don't believe Sanji trained to use a 3rd level armament. As I explained in the last video, it is subconsciously activated due to traumatic memories, hence why it is called Hell's Memories. To add to that, with some info brought up in this video, we have to take into account how emotional Sanji is. Emotions have often shown to be a way for people that don't know how to properly use Haki to still display its abilities. So yes, I agree, it wouldn't make much sense for him to have learned the 3rd form without getting a good grasp of the prior forms. However, I never claimed that he properly learned the 3rd level of Armament Haki. I believe it was a power he just realized he could use out of nowhere. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's actually the very same way he learned to use Skywalk, aka Moonwalk, which is Rokushiki, aka Haki. Check out that video if you haven't. Secondly, while it may seem like it shouldn't make much sense for someone that specializes in observation to subconsciously learn a high level armament, it actually makes perfect sense in the context of chakra and the color spectrum. Let's take a quick look at someone that has been specialized in armament for over a decade. I may have clowned on Virgo for using basic armament in part 2, but I don't actually think he hasn't advanced his armament because he isn't good enough. I believe it's because he knows which color of Haki he specializes in, and decided to stick to that. Let's say the color of his Haki, aka Spirit, is red for root chakra. So what this means is that even though Virgo specializes in Armament Haki, He even more so specialized in armament in its most physical form, aka hardening. Sanji, on the other hand, is a more spiritual person, so as someone that specializes in observation, it only makes sense that he would be better off using an armament ability that is more spiritual. If Sanji's Haki had color, I would assume it was green, because he seems to be most in tune with his heart. Recall when I said this. Heart chakra is quite close to the solar plexus, thus it's much easier to count on your gut instincts. When you consider that the heart and solar chakras are right next to each other, it isn't as outrageous that Sanji would use the third form of armament. And quite frankly, he needs it in order to keep up with physically superior opponents like Virgo. What he doesn't have in physical strength, he'll make up with the power of his fiery spirit. In conclusion, what we've learned is that your power level isn't determined by the color of your Haki.
Whether you have observation Haki that makes you have incredibly fast reflexes or see the future or read minds, what matters most is how the power is used. They all have pros and cons, and Conquerors may be super rare, but that doesn't mean it's the strongest. It is rarely used in battle by those who have it. That just goes to show it's not some OP technique that just trumps all others. I think I got my point across.
Oh, and remember I said Shoku meant colors or food? I also seen another translation for eclipse. You know, One Piece is big on the sun, moon, and dawn. I figured I'd just mention it.
Now to better explain armament attacks versus Conqueror attack. Alright, so I put this grid together for you. So there's 2 rows vertical and 2 rows horizontal, and 4 boxes. The rule is that anything within the box is tangible to each other. So like a punch can hit a human like Ace's real body. Obviously, those 2 things will interact and touch each other. Armament Haki and Logia's powers, those interact with each other. Fire is going to interact with fire, so like if Ace and Prometheus were to battle, they would be able to interact with each other. You know, a similar example would be how Ace and Akainu can interact with each other due to the heat or whatever. If you have 2 ghosts, they would be in the same box that they can interact with each other. So I'm going to go over multiple scenarios. The first one is a Haki punch is used against Ace's fire body. The fire due to Devil Fruit is being negated by Haki, thus it's just like punching a regular body. The verdict is that the body is a tangible and physical being attacked with something that is tangible and physical, thus the punch actually touches Ace. Pretty simple. The next scenario. A Haki punch is used against Prometheus. So either 1, 2, or both scenarios will happen. In the first scenario, the Haki punch doesn't negate the powers because unlike Ace, his fire body isn't created by Devil Fruit. It's a natural occurring flame that existed prior to Prometheus. The verdict is that the fire is an intangible and physical thing being attacked by something that is tangible and physical, thus the punch does not touch Prometheus, because it's no different than punching fire. Scenario 2 is that the Haki punch does not interact with Prometheus because he exists on the spiritual plane of existence. Although the source of Armament Haki may be spiritual, the attack itself exists physically. The verdict is that the soul fragment is intangible and spiritual thing, being attacked by something that is tangible and physical. Thus, the punch does not touch Prometheus. Lastly, we have Brook's spiritual attack versus Prometheus. Brook's skeleton is physical, however his true form is that of a spirit. This means that Brook and Prometheus exist on the same plane of existence. As per the rule, if they are in the same box, then they are tangible to each other. Sure, they both fall under intangible, however that is from the physical realm perspective. In the spiritual realm, spiritual beings interact with each other. Thus, his attack can actually land on Prometheus, ignoring the fire and attacking the soul body, almost like Armament Haki would do to Logia. The verdict. The soul fragment is an intangible and spiritual thing being attacked by something that is intangible and spiritual. Thus, Brook's attack does touch Prometheus. Alright, so, even myself writing that, I was confusing myself, like, what? So I just figured, maybe people might get confused, and I just wanted to put a little extra effort in trying to explain it, but I didn't want to make it too long in the main video, so that's why it's here. But I really hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.